welcome to the stage our moderator, Katherine Ward from Global News, and our speakers, CEO of ONWARD Medical, Dave Marver, and Managing Director of SCI Ventures, Adrien Cohen. Enjoy.
Thank you so much for joining me on stage here today. Audience, you are in for a treat. So I want to get right to it. Adrien, we're going to start with you. Tell us a little bit about SCI Ventures and the personal story that went into creating it.
Sure. Well, thank you for having us. SCI Ventures is the first venture philanthropy fund dedicated to reversing paralysis. So we invest in startups, biotech, medtech, that are developing new cures, new treatments for people living with paralysis. It started out of personal frustration. My brother actually had a bad accident, fractured his spine, and ended up completely paralyzed from the waist down. And when the accident happened, I got very frustrated and disillusioned with just realizing that there's just no options for people living with paralysis. And so I also says that a big obstacle preventing innovation is the lack of funding, and that's why I decided to create a fund to spark more innovation.
Unbelievable. So perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about what you did to fill that gap. How did you enlist stakeholders? How did you fundraise?
Yeah, the way we've structured the fund is very unique. It's to be the specialist fund in paralysis. So we've, for the first time, managed to get all of the leading medical research foundations behind the vehicle. So Christopher Reeve Foundation, as you know, Christopher Reeve used to play Superman, broke his neck, ended up paralyzed. We have Shepherd Center, which is the largest neuro rehab center in the world for SCI. Promobilia, Wing for Life, Spinal Research. So essentially, we got the leading players in the US, UK, and Europe behind the vehicle. And what it gives us is a sort of superpower. It's expertise, it's network, which means we know what is the best innovation. And Dave will talk about one of these innovations. We have the network to nudge this innovation all the way to the clinic and to market. And that's really the model, is to bring this expertise, this network, and obviously funding to get the best innovation from the lab to the real world.
So Dave, I'll turn it over to you now. So you are the CEO of ONWARD Medical, a portfolio company with SCI Ventures. What's your mission, and how is your approach different?
I think our approach is different because it's new. We're the first company that was created to develop technology and therapies specifically for this population, for spinal cord injury. This is a group of people that have long been ignored because companies tend to focus on larger populations such as stroke and Parkinson's disease. So we want to introduce therapies for these 7 million people worldwide who have spinal cord injury because it is indeed such a devastating injury.
Yes, 7 million people. So, and in terms of that reach, what are we talking about in terms of the spinal cord injuries? Articulate some of the nature of those for us.
Well, most people associate spinal cord injury with paralysis and loss of sensation, but it comes with many other challenges. Difficulty going to the bathroom, loss of sexual function, difficulty regulating your blood pressure and body temperature. So as a result, assistance is needed just to get through the day. And with our therapies and our research and development pipeline, we want to address all of those things, starting with the restoration of hand and arm function, which is the top priority among people with spinal cord injury.
Yeah, I mean, we use our hands for everything, right? Just as you say, to get through those daily functions. So perhaps we'll talk a little bit about how ONWARD Medical is translating those breakthroughs from the lab to the clinic, because it is so easy for things to stay in research for a long time until they are able to be in the hands of the patients and their families. Tell us about how you're getting them from research to right in the field with the people.
Well, the first thing we've done is we've built a company with all of the required capabilities. So we have experts in conducting clinical studies, developing hardware, software, firmware, people that understand how to train and commercialize devices and so forth. And at the foundation, though, is a very special technology. It's a way of stimulating the spinal cord in a very precise way to restore movement and other critical functions. And we do that with 3 different platforms. If you want me to...
Tell me about them. I want to hear about all 3.
I happen to bring them with me. So this is our external platform. This stimulates the spinal cord through the skin. We call this ARC-EX. We also have a fully implanted platform, which we call ARC-IM. And we've recently been combining this with an implanted brain-computer interface, something we call ARC-BCI. So this enables thought-driven restoration of movement.
So where are you at in getting these to patients?
Well, the closest one is ARC-EX. So this is in front of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration right now. We expect clearance really in a matter of weeks. And so now for the first time in human history, there will be, we expect, a therapy that has been shown to restore movement and function after spinal cord injury.
Can you walk us through how this works? I mean, we've got this box. What happens here?
Well, this box connects to leads that are placed on the skin near the area of the spinal cord that's responsible for a given function. So the first recovery target for us, as we discussed, is hand and arm function. That's controlled in the cervical spinal cord near the neck. And so we stimulate in a very precise way through those leads. And in a way, we amplify the signals that are coming from the brain to enable restoration of movement.
That's amazing. So Adrien, back over to you. Tell me a little bit about how you learned of the work of ONWARD Medical, and how does their approach fit your vision for the work that SCI Ventures is looking to conquer?
Yeah, I mean, we're obviously proud backer of ONWARD Medical. It's an amazing illustration of how venture capital can support innovation and take it all the way to hopefully very soon FDA approval, as you were saying. The ONWARD Medical story started in 2016 when the Christopher Reeve Foundation led the first investment, a $5 million investment, into what eventually became ONWARD. And, you know, at the time, Reeve had been funding academic research in electrical and epidural stimulation for decades. And you know, it's a problem that you see across indication, but specifically in SCI. You tend to fund innovation in the lab, but it stays in the lab. And there's, you know, the role of venture capital is to take a risk in early stage innovation and take it out of the lab. So the Reeve Foundation take that chance, invested in, you know, first $5 million, and you fast forward to today, in like 6-7 years, the company has grown tremendously. I think you guys have raised, what, 250 million plus? In aggregate?
200, yeah.
200? I'm always a bit too aggressive, but 200 is a nice number. When public, you're about to get FDA approval. It's about to be the first FDA-approved option for people living with paralysis. And that took, you know, 6 years. And so this acceleration you can get when you bring the right people, the right funding, and the right sort of enablers around the company. And obviously with SCI Ventures, our hope is to replicate this kind of success story. It's to build not just one ONWARD company, but 20. That's why we've created this vehicle.
Tell me a little bit about how you guys work together. I mean, what's it like to be on the forefront of medicine, this cutting-edge technology, hopefully going to be approved soon? I mean, what's that like?
Well, for us, having an investment from SCI Ventures and pedigreed, highly respected institutions like Shepherd Center and the Reeve Foundation, it's an imprimatur of credibility for us. So it helps us recruit and attract talent. It helps us raise capital from other investors. It's really been quite an important boost. And you may sit here and you might think it's relatively easy to raise capital in this space. It is not. And so what Adrien and his colleagues have done is vitally important because there has not been a company yet that has shown it can make money and provide a good return for investors. And so we hope to forge that path, but they're providing critically important sort of nurturing funding for new companies and new concepts.
Adrien, why is it so hard to raise money in this space? You would think that it would be a slam dunk. You know, people know about the Reeve Foundation, but why is it a challenge? You and I have spoken about this quite a bit.
Yeah, I couldn't hear you very well, but I think the question is, why isn't there much more funding in this?
Or why is it a challenge to
Yeah,
fundraise?
I mean, I think there's two main reasons. I think number one, there is a misconception that the market is too small. which it isn't. We're talking about 15 million people living with paralysis, and it's probably the most, or one of the most expensive medical condition to manage on the planet. It's 3 to 6 million, and that's a very low estimate per individual living with the condition. So the market is much bigger than we think, but most funds don't have this expertise and knowledge. And I think the second reason is, and I'm sorry for the VCs in the audience, but there's a bit of a pack mentality in venture capital. And so until you can prove that there is one big success, until you can show one comparable, it's much harder to get private investors to chip in. And that is why we created the fund, to get this one success and to give this credibility, this stamp that you were talking about, Dave, to lower the risk to invest. And eventually, we hope we can attract more funding to the mission. I'll give you another example. The way we structured the fund, this approach of lowering the risk to catalyze funding, to get more funding into the mission, we did not come up with the model. It's been a very successful model that has been proven in a number of indications. In the US, the fund that we've most closely learned from is the type 1 diabetes fund. Juvenile diabetes, it's a genetic condition, 10 million people. In 2016, the Foundation for Juvenile Diabetes, GDRF, created a fund, an evergreen fund, doing exactly what we're doing for paralysis, called the T1D fund. And they started with 40 million. And their role was to activate the market, to get other investors to look into the mission and start investing as well. You fast forward to today, their fund has gone from 40 million to 250 million. They've attracted $1 billion to the fight against juvenile diabetes. And they had last year the first FDA-approved drug that is modifying the disease. So it's not a cure yet, but it's actually modifying the condition. That's the kind of success we hope to replicate in paralysis.
So if you were trying to paint the picture of where you are in that arc, where do you think you are, and is momentum picking up?
I would say we're starting to see some really tangible momentum. ONWARD, obviously, is the most mature example of innovation that is going to make a big difference for our community and about to get FDA approval. A week ago, actually 2 weeks ago, we announced another massive success. We have a drug company that's in portfolio called Axonis that is essentially reactivating dormant neurons. They're a spin-out from Harvard, and we nudged them all the way from the lab to the edge of the clinic, and they just announced a $115 million Series A, which means they have now the resources to go to the clinic. They have a chance to test in human their drug, and hopefully in a few years this will become a commercial drug for a number of neurological disorders, including SCI. So we're starting to see some early signal that the model works.
Yeah.
Adrien gets a lot of credit here. He does, because he's a successful tech entrepreneur. Unfortunately, his brother had an injury, but he's brought all of his energy and expertise to bear against this problem,
right,
to see how can we catalyze more investment, more innovation.
So Dave, I want to ask you about the BCI therapies. What's your timeline to get that to market?
Well, that's among the most interesting things we're doing. And even though we expect to commercialize this in weeks, our BCI-enabled therapy is maybe 8 years away. Now, when I say that, you might think, oh, it's slow. We're actually ahead of everyone else in this realm, even though there's some U.S. companies that generate a lot of noise. They're using BCI technology to control computer games and so forth. We're actually using BCI technology to restore movement of the human body with thought. And we've done 3 humans so far. We have funding, again, from the Christopher Reeve Foundation to do several more over the course of the next year. And we envision that we will introduce a BCI-enabled therapy to restore movement, I'd say, again, within 8 to 10 years.
Yeah, 8 to 10 years does seem like a very long road ahead, but you're right. In the medical community, that is very compressed time when we're talking about restoring function. Can you tell us a little bit more about the BCI therapy and just how it works? We talked about the ARC-EX. Tell us about the other one.
So we have a BCI. It was actually developed in France, and it sits right on top of the motor cortex, so it doesn't penetrate the brain. And it records a person's thoughts, their intention to move. And it sends those brain recordings to our system, which then decodes them and gives instructions to our implantable device. So it's this digital bridge, we call it, thought-driven movement.
That's amazing. And for the patients who have tested this out, can you explain a little bit about what their life was like before and how they've regained some function?
Yeah, so the first ever human to receive this therapy actually had a spinal cord stimulator already, so using our therapy to restore the ability to walk. And we added the BCI, so he could control his movement with thought. And this was actually published in Nature last year. But he could control the length of his stride. He could pause. He could traverse more complex terrain like stairs. And we're actually even more excited to use this thought-driven movement for hand and arm function, because there the movements are less repetitive. And one person was implanted earlier last year. We've done a second person now. So we're still learning here. Each person we implant, we learn a lot from. But so far, it's exciting and promising. Yeah.
Well, and especially when you think of paralysis, you think of something that is permanent. There is this misconception, and you guys are shifting that narrative, both through the VC and the devices. I mean, Adrien, as we wind down our conversation, tell me about your hope for the future. What do you hope the next 5, 10, 15 years look like, and what continues to motivate you to accomplish those goals?
Yeah, I mean, I think time horizon is definitely an important point. The way we think about our approach is, number one, to sort of go after near-term functional improvement, functional recovery, and that's more like a 3 to 5 years. So my hope is that within the next 3 to 5 years, therapies, treatments like ONWARD Medical, Axonic plug, etc., will be available, meaning that people will be able to benefit from this innovation. And you'll get a number of impaired functions that can recover or be restored. Bladder movement, bowel movement, spasticity, pain, movement, and that really matters in terms of quality of life. And that's, I think, 3 to 5 years from now. And then 10 years from now, our ultimate goal is to get to a biological repair of the spinal cord. So reverse and regenerate nerves and get to what we call a cure. That's more 10 to 12 years from now. And I think the solution will come from a combination of tech, but obviously it will have to be a combination of devices like ONWARD, but also biological approaches, cell therapy, tissue manufacturing, gene therapy, and hopefully that will be an option for our community, but we need to start now. I think that's the main message today is if we want to see a change in the trajectory, and if we want to see a world that looks different 10 years from now, we have to start nudging innovation today.
Dave, same question to you. I mean, what are the challenges you anticipate in your field, and how do you hope to address these going forward?
Well, our vision, I think, aligns well with what Adrien just outlined. For all of the issues and challenges faced by people after spinal cord injury, we want our therapies to be able to address every one of them. And the vision is that a person with spinal cord injury can enter into a conversation with their physical therapist or clinician and say, I would like to fix this, this, and this. And we know with 80% certainty we can do it. A lot of the things we've talked about seem like they're maybe far off, 3 to 5 years, 8 years. But for all of human history, there's been nothing that can restore function or movement. So this really is a very exciting time if you have a spinal cord injury or you're the family member or loved one of someone with spinal cord injury. We're really at the cusp of doing something.
Well, and I imagine us being back here at Web Summit in 10 to 12 years having a very different conversation. I mean, closing thoughts. What motivates you? What are you worried about? I mean, how do you approach this going forward? Dave, and then Adrien will finish with you.
Well, I think Adrien has a very personal motivation. My motivation at this stage of my career is just to make an impact, make a difference, do something that's hard, that's never been done before. That's what keeps me going, as well as helping people like Adrien's brother.
Adrien.
Yeah. I mean, I've obviously already shared what drives me. Hopefully 5 to 10 years from now, there are more options for people like my brother. But that's, again, much bigger than just my brother. I will add, maybe as a closing thought, that there's a big overlap between spinal cord injury and other neuro conditions. And very often people don't realize that, which means that the kind of innovation, the kind of technology that we're funding today is going to yield impact way beyond people living with paralysis. Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, stroke. if you can regenerate nerves in the back, you can then, in a much easier manner, translate this innovation to the brain. And I think this is going to be probably, hopefully, will yield a very big impact beyond paralysis, and that's an additional driver for me.
Yeah, indeed. This device and this therapy is already being used to restore or augment the ability of people with Parkinson's disease to walk more normally. We're looking at blood pressure dysregulation for people with Parkinson's disease, also in the stroke population as well. So Adrien's absolutely right. Our North Star, our mission is to help people with spinal cord injury, but the impact can and should be even broader than that.
Well, Dave, Adrien, thank you so much for this conversation today. As I said, in 10 years, I hope that this conversation was only the beginning of what is going to be a truly real solution for paralysis.
Thank you.
Thank you, Katherine.
Thank you.